My beloved child, I ask you this morning to lay down your sword. I ask you to release your grip on the reins you have been holding so tightly, trying to steer your life in the direction you think it should go. I ask you to stop fighting, stop striving, stop exhausting yourself with the endless effort to control every outcome, to manage every variable, to ensure that everything works out according to your carefully constructed plan. For decades, you have been trying to be your own savior, your own rescuer, and I tell you with infinite gentleness and boundless love that this burden was never meant for you to carry alone. You were not created to navigate this world entirely through the force of your own will, the power of your own intellect, the strength of your own determination. Yes, you have will, you have intelligence, you have strength, and these gifts are beautiful and necessary, but they were designed to work in partnership with something far greater than yourself, something far more intelligent, something far more powerful, and far more loving than anything your individual mind could ever conceive. This morning, I invite you to surrender, not as a defeat, not as weakness, not as giving up on your dreams and your hopes, but as the most powerful act of wisdom and faith you could possibly perform. I understand that the word surrender carries difficult connotations for you. You have been taught that surrender means weakness, that it means admitting failure, that it means allowing yourself to be trampled upon by forces larger than yourself. You have been taught that you must be strong, that you must be in control, that you must never let down your guard or show vulnerability, for if you do, people will take advantage of you, life will crush you, and you will end up broken and destroyed. These teachings came from somewhere, perhaps from parents who were themselves afraid, perhaps from a culture that values domination over cooperation, perhaps from past experiences where you were indeed hurt when you trusted the wrong people. But I am not the culture that taught you to fear surrender. I am not the traumatic experiences that conditioned you to hold on to control. I am the one who speaks to you now with a voice full of tenderness and truth, asking you to surrender not to the world's cruelty, but to love, not to violence, but to healing, not to loss, but to the most abundant gain you could possibly imagine. When I speak of surrender, I am speaking of something that requires tremendous courage and strength. It is far easier to stay locked in the fortress of your own defensive ego, to maintain the exhausting vigilance of trying to control everything, to keep your heart guarded and your vulnerability hidden. True surrender requires you to take off your armor and walk forward naked and undefended into the arms of a love you might not fully understand yet, but which I am inviting you to trust. Surrender means that you acknowledge you do not have to know how everything will work out. You do not have to see the entire path before you take the first step. You do not have to have all the answers before you allow yourself to be guided. Surrender means that you trust that there is an intelligence operating through this universe that is far more wise than your individual mind, and that this intelligence has your well-being at heart. This is not blind faith. It is faith based on the evidence of billions of people throughout history who have discovered that when they stop fighting and start flowing, when they stop demanding and start allowing, when they stop trying to force their will onto life and instead align their will with something greater, miracles begin to unfold in ways they could never have orchestrated through their own effort. I remember a man named Bartimaeus, a blind beggar who sat by the roadside in Jericho, unable to see the world around him, unable to move independently through his environment. Day after day, he sat in darkness, asking passers-by for alms, his blindness a prison that confined him to a single spot. But when word came that I was passing through town, something stirred within him, a hope, a knowing, a belief that perhaps his situation was not final, that perhaps healing was possible. He began to cry out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And the people around him told him to be quiet, to accept his lot, to stop making a fuss. But Bartimaeus did not surrender to the voices that told him to give up. Instead, he surrendered to a deeper voice within himself that knew he deserved healing, that believed in his own worthiness, that refused to accept blindness as his permanent destiny. I stopped and asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And he said, "Lord, let me recover my sight." And immediately his eyes were opened and he could see. But notice something important here. Bartimaeus had to first surrender his resignation, had to let go of his acceptance of limitation, had to cry out loudly in the face of those who told him to be quiet. His healing came not from passive acceptance, but from active surrender to a higher power that he believed could and would transform his situation. What I want you to understand is that surrender is not passivity. Surrender is not lying down and allowing yourself to be walked over by life's circumstances. Surrender is acknowledging that while you must take aligned action, while you must do the work that is yours to do, you cannot control the ultimate outcome. You plant the seed, but you do not control the weather or the soil chemistry or the pace at which the seed grows. You show up for your relationships with honesty and presence, but you cannot control whether the other person chooses to meet you with equal commitment. You build your business with creativity and dedication, but you cannot control the economy or the competition or the sudden changes in the market. You pursue your health with wise choices, but you cannot control whether your body will cooperate or whether unexpected illness might arise. And when you accept this truth, when you stop exhausting yourself trying to control the uncontrollable, you free up enormous amounts of energy to focus on what actually is within your power, your effort, your intention, your attitude, your choices, your openness to guidance. There is a woman in your scriptures whom I healed of an issue of blood, and her story illuminates the nature of true surrender. This woman had been bleeding for 12 years, which in her cultural context meant she was ritually unclean, isolated from community, unable to be touched, unable to participate in religious rituals. She had spent all her money on physicians seeking a cure, yet her condition only grew worse. Can you imagine the desperation, the hopelessness, the diminishment of self that comes from years of isolation and suffering? And yet, when she heard that I was in the area, something awakened within her, a whisper of possibility, a faint glimmer of hope. She did not approach me directly, for she believed she was too unclean, too unworthy of my direct attention. But she thought to herself, if I just touch his garment, I will be made whole. This is a profound act of surrender. She surrendered her belief that she was unworthy. She surrendered her fear of rejection. She surrendered her need to approach things the right way or the proper way. And instead, she simply reached out with whatever faith she could muster and touched the edge of my cloak. And power went out from me, and immediately she was healed. But I tell you, what healed her was not just the physical touch, but her own surrender, her willingness to believe despite evidence to the contrary, her willingness to take action despite her fear, her willingness to reach out with an open heart. This morning, I ask you, what are you refusing to surrender? What are you still gripping with all your might, convinced that if you let go, it will be lost forever? Perhaps you are refusing to surrender your need to be right, always needing to win arguments and prove that your perspective is superior to others. Perhaps you are refusing to surrender your resentment toward those who have hurt you, holding on to anger like a badge of honor or a proof of loyalty to yourself. Perhaps you are refusing to surrender your attachment to a specific timeline, demanding that things happen on your schedule rather than on the universe's schedule. Perhaps you are refusing to surrender your perfectionism, believing that any flaw or mistake renders you unworthy of love and success. Perhaps you are refusing to surrender your fear, holding it close as if it somehow protects you from being hurt again. Whatever it is, I invite you to examine it this morning and to ask yourself, is this something that is truly serving me, or have I been carrying it out of habit, out of fear, out of a belief system that no longer serves my highest good? I remember another man, called Nicodemus, who was a Pharisee and a ruler of the Jewish people, educated and respected, someone who had built his entire identity around knowledge and expertise and the rigorous practice of religious law. He came to me at night, probably ashamed to be seen in public with me, and he asked me questions, searching for understanding, trying to comprehend spiritual truth through his intellect. I said to him, unless one is born again, one cannot see the kingdom of God. And he was confused, asking, how is it possible for someone to be born when they are old? I told him that being born again is not a physical rebirth, but a spiritual transformation that requires letting go of the old ways of understanding and allowing yourself to be remade from the ground up. This deeply threatened Nicodemus because he had spent decades building expertise in the old ways, and to surrender that and to be born anew as a spiritual infant, dependent and unknowing, felt like the ultimate loss. But I tell you, the very thing he feared, the dissolution of his old identity, was precisely what would free him to become his truest self. Later in the story, after I had been crucified, Nicodemus came to care for my body, and he became a follower, and he discovered that the knowledge he had accumulated did not have to be destroyed, but could be integrated into a larger, more spiritual understanding. His surrender was not a loss, but a transformation. Many of you carry wounds that make surrender feel dangerous. Perhaps you were raised in a family where love was conditional, and you learned that you could only be acceptable if you performed, if you achieved, if you controlled every aspect of your presentation to the world. Perhaps you experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely, and you built walls around your heart to make sure that would never happen again. Perhaps you experienced poverty or deprivation, and you learned that the only way to survive was through endless vigilance and endless effort, never allowing yourself to rest, never allowing yourself to believe that you might be provided for. Perhaps you experienced illness or disability, and you learned that your body could not be trusted, that you must constantly monitor and control it to prevent disaster. These are real wounds, real adaptations that kept you safe and that allowed you to survive in difficult circumstances. I do not diminish them, and I do not ask you to simply forget them or to transcend them through sheer willpower, but I do ask you to examine them this morning and to ask yourself, is this something that is truly serving me, or have I been carrying it out of habit, out of fear, out of a belief system that no longer serves my highest good? I want to speak to you about the good work that I have begun in you. Whether you recognize it or not, whether you feel it or not, I am constantly working within you, shaping you, refining you, healing you, calling you toward your highest potential. This work did not begin when you first consciously sought me or first said a prayer asking for my help. This work began before you were born. It began when your parents were born. It began at the moment of your conception, when the unique combination of genes and circumstances that would make you who you are came together. It began in every childhood experience, every joy, every pain, every moment that shaped your character. It is still happening now, in this very moment, even as you read these words.
The question is not whether I am working in you. I am, I always have been, I always will be, but whether you will surrender to that work, whether you will cooperate with it, whether you will stop fighting against what I am trying to accomplish in you and instead align yourself with my purpose. There is a story of a man born blind from birth, and the disciples asked me, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" They were looking for a reason, trying to understand why someone would suffer such a condition. But I said, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be displayed in him. This is a profound shift in perspective, from understanding suffering as punishment to understanding it as an opportunity for transformation and revelation. The man's blindness was not a tragedy that God could not prevent. It was an invitation for deeper work to occur. When I healed him by putting mud on his eyes and telling him to wash in the pool of Siloam, the physical healing was only part of what happened. The deeper healing was the man's discovery that he could trust me, that his condition did not define him, that he was worthy of attention and care, that transformation was possible even when he had spent his entire life in darkness. And when the Pharisees questioned him about his healing, demanding to know how I had healed him on the Sabbath, the man displayed a beautiful kind of surrender. He did not try to defend me or to argue with them. Instead, he simply said, "All I know is that I was blind, and now I can see." He surrendered to the mystery of what had happened to him, and in that surrender he found peace. What darkness have you been living in? What have you assumed was your permanent condition? What have you believed about yourself that actually is not true? Perhaps you have believed that you are unlovable because of mistakes you have made. Perhaps you have believed that you are incapable because of failures you have experienced. Perhaps you have believed that you are fundamentally flawed, broken in some way that cannot be repaired. Perhaps you have believed that your past determines your future, that who you were is who you must always be. I tell you that these beliefs are lies, and they are lies that have been reinforced by a world that profits from your self-doubt, that benefits from your insecurity, that continues to tell you that you are not enough. But I see you as you truly are, not as the stories you tell yourself or the stories others have told you, but as a being of infinite potential, a work in progress that I am constantly refining and perfecting. This good work that I have begun in you is not about achievement or accomplishment. It is not about becoming more impressive or more successful or more admired by others. It is about becoming more authentic, more whole, more aligned with your true nature. It is about healing the splits within yourself, the parts of you that hate yourself, the parts of you that are ashamed, the parts of you that do not believe you deserve happiness. It is about integrating your shadow side, the parts of you that you have disowned or pushed down, so that you can become fully human, fully alive, fully present. It is about deepening your capacity for love, for compassion, for connection. It is about waking up to the truth of who you are and who you have always been, beneath all the conditioning and all the armor you have built. I remember a man with a withered hand who came to the synagogue on the Sabbath. The Pharisees watched to see whether I would heal him on the Sabbath, so they would have grounds to accuse me of breaking the law. And I looked at this man and asked him to stand up in front of everyone, which required tremendous courage on his part. Then I asked the Pharisees, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill?" They did not answer because they knew what I was getting at. Then I said to the man, "Stretch out your hand," and he stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. But notice what happened here. The man was the one who had to take action. I did not grab his hand and stretch it for him. I invited him to stretch it out, and in that act of stepping beyond what he believed was possible for him, in that surrender to my invitation, he experienced healing. The restoration of his hand was not just physical, it was also psychological and spiritual, because he stepped beyond his beliefs about his limitations and discovered that he was capable of more than he thought. What if this morning I invite you to stretch out your withered hand? What if I invite you to step beyond what you believe is possible for you? What if I invite you to try something you have always been afraid to try, to say something you have always been afraid to say, to become someone you have always been afraid to become? The only thing that can truly withhold you from this transformation is your own unwillingness to surrender your limiting beliefs, your own refusal to step beyond your comfort zone, your own insistence on remaining exactly as you are, because at least you know what that feels like, even if it brings you suffering. The work I am doing within you is a work of completion. You are not unfinished in the sense of being broken or inadequate. You are unfinished in the sense that there is always room for growth, always room for deeper understanding, always room for greater love. Just as a forest is constantly growing and changing and responding to the seasons, so too is your soul constantly evolving and transforming. The work is never done because life is a process, not a destination. But when you surrender to this process, when you stop trying to force yourself to be something you are not, and instead allow yourself to naturally unfold according to your own unique blueprint, everything becomes easier. You experience less resistance, less struggle, less exhaustion. You experience more flow, more grace, more synchronicity, the sense that life is supporting you, that circumstances are lining up in your favor, that you are being guided toward your highest good. I ask you this morning, what are you trying to force? What are you pushing yourself toward because you believe you should, rather than because it genuinely calls to you? What are you resisting in your life because it does not match your expectations or your timeline? Perhaps you are trying to force a relationship that is not meant to be, holding on to it long past the time when you should have let it go. Perhaps you are trying to force yourself into a career that looked good on paper, but does not actually fulfill your soul. Perhaps you are trying to force yourself to be like someone else, a parent, a celebrity, a friend, rather than discovering who you actually are. Perhaps you are trying to force yourself to be different, to change in ways that your soul is not actually ready to change, creating internal conflict and struggle in the process. When you surrender this forcing, when you release this resistance, when you stop swimming upstream and allow yourself to float with the current, you will discover that life becomes infinitely easier and infinitely more enjoyable. There is a parable I taught about the vine and the branches. I said that I am the vine and you are the branches, and those who remain in me and I in them will bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. This does not mean that you are helpless or powerless. It means that your true power comes from connection, from staying rooted in something larger than yourself, from allowing nourishment to flow through you from a source beyond your individual effort. A branch does not have to strain or force itself to produce fruit. It simply has to stay connected to the vine, to remain open to the flow of nutrients and energy that comes through the trunk. The vine does all the complicated biological work, the photosynthesis, the nutrient transport, the growth metabolism, and the branch simply participates in that process by remaining connected and receptive. How often do you try to produce fruit through your own effort, trying to force yourself to be productive and creative and successful, when what you actually need to do is ensure that you remain deeply connected to the source, that you are receiving the nourishment you need, that you are allowing the energy to flow through you rather than trying to generate it all yourself? When you surrender to this connection, when you make time to pray, to meditate, to be still, to listen for the voice of guidance within you, you are doing the most productive thing you could possibly do. You are ensuring that you stay connected to the vine. You are maintaining the flow of nourishment. You are opening yourself to inspiration and intuition and wisdom that far exceeds what your individual mind could generate. And when you operate from this place of connection, the work that flows through you is incomparably more effective, more beautiful, more impactful than anything you could have created through struggle and strain. I remember a woman at a well who had been married 5 times and was living with a man who was not her husband. She had experienced tremendous rejection and betrayal, and she had learned to expect that people would abandon her, that she was fundamentally unworthy of genuine love and commitment. When I encountered her at the well, I could have condemned her, could have judged her choices, could have told her that she was a sinner and that she needed to change before I would accept her. But instead, I offered her water, spiritual water that would satisfy her deep thirst for meaning and connection. I offered her grace. I offered her the understanding that her worth was not dependent on her past choices or on the opinions of others, but was inherent in her being. She surrendered her defensive walls and her shame, and she became a messenger, telling everyone in her town about the encounter she had with me. Her life completely transformed, not because I forced her to change, but because she experienced unconditional love and acceptance, and this experience healed something deep within her. You too have been drinking from the wells of the world, seeking satisfaction and belonging and meaning in places that ultimately leave you thirsty. You too have experienced rejection and have learned to expect abandonment. You too have built walls around your heart to protect yourself from further pain. And I am inviting you this morning to surrender these protective walls, to release your defensive strategies, to come to the well and drink the water that I offer, which is the water of grace, of unconditional love, of acceptance for who you are right now, with all your flaws and all your struggles and all your failures. This water will not merely satisfy your thirst for a moment, it will become a spring within you, bubbling up continually, providing a constant source of nourishment and renewal. The good work that I have begun in you is visible in your life right now if you have eyes to see it. Look at how far you have come. Look at the obstacles you have overcome, the challenges you have survived, the growth you have experienced even through the difficulties. Look at your capacity to love, even after being hurt. Look at your willingness to try again, even after failing. Look at your hope, which continues to flicker even in the darkest moments. Look at your resilience, your strength, your beauty. Yes, your genuine beauty, not the superficial beauty that the world celebrates, but the deeper beauty of a soul that keeps showing up, that keeps trying, that keeps believing that things can get better. I have been working within you all along, and you are not where you were yesterday, and you are not where you will be tomorrow. You are continuously unfolding, continuously becoming, continuously transforming. But this work can only be completed when you surrender your resistance to it. As long as you are fighting the current, as long as you are insisting that things must happen according to your timeline and your specifications, as long as you are refusing to trust the process, the work is hindered. But when you surrender, when you say, I don't know the way, but I trust that you do. I don't know what is best for me, but I trust that you do. I don't know how this is going to work out, but I trust that it will work out for my highest good. then the work can flow through you unimpeded. Then healing can occur. Then transformation can happen. Then miracles can manifest in ways that will astonish and delight you. I want to address those of you who struggle with the surrender of control because you have learned that the world is unsafe, that you cannot trust others, that the only way to protect yourself is through constant vigilance and self-reliance. I hear you. I see you. I understand the wisdom of these survival strategies in the context in which you developed them, but I ask you to consider whether the world is truly as unsafe as you believe it to be, or whether your perception has been distorted by trauma and fear. I ask you to consider whether there might be trustworthy people in your life now, people who have proven themselves to be reliable and genuine, and whether you might be extending your mistrust of those who hurt you in the past to these people who actually care about you. I ask you to consider whether your self-reliance, your unwillingness to ask for help, your belief that you must carry everything alone has actually made your life easier, or whether it has made it harder, more exhausting, more lonely. There is a story of a man who was caught in a flood, and he climbed onto his roof to escape the rising water. A neighbor came by in a boat and offered to rescue him, but the man said, "No, I trust in God to save me." The water continued to rise, and a rescue helicopter came down and offered to lift him to safety, but again the man refused, saying, "No, I trust in God to save me." The man drowned, and when he arrived in heaven and encountered me, he asked, "Why didn't you save me?" And I said, "I sent you a neighbor with a boat, and I sent you a helicopter. What more did you expect?" The point of this story is that God often works through other people, through circumstances, through synchronicities, and apparent coincidences. When you refuse to accept help because you believe you should be able to handle everything alone, you are actually refusing to see and acknowledge the ways that I am already working in your life. So I ask you to surrender your need to be completely self-sufficient, to surrender your belief that asking for help is a sign of weakness, to surrender your isolation. I ask you to reach out. I ask you to tell someone the truth about what you are struggling with. I ask you to accept support when it is offered. I ask you to discover that in your vulnerability, in your willingness to admit that you do not have all the answers and do not have all the strength, you actually connect more deeply with others and with me. For it is only the humble, the ones who have surrendered their pride and their pretense, who can truly receive grace. It is only those who admit their weakness who can be filled with strength. It is only those who surrender their illusion of control who can experience genuine peace. I also want to address those of you who surrendered too easily, who have given your power away to others, who have learned to be compliant and accommodating at the expense of your own well-being and integrity. For some of you, the surrender I am speaking of will actually look like the opposite. It will look like standing up, speaking up, claiming your power, setting boundaries, saying no to things that do not serve you. Surrender is not about becoming a doormat. Surrender is not about allowing yourself to be abused or disrespected or taken advantage of. Surrender is about alignment with truth and love. And sometimes the truest and most loving thing you can do is to refuse to participate in dynamics that are harmful. So, hear me. If you are in a situation where you are being hurt, where your boundaries are not being respected, where your integrity is being compromised, I am not asking you to surrender to that situation. I am inviting you to surrender your fear and to take action to protect yourself. I am inviting you to surrender your belief that you do not deserve better and to claim a life of respect and dignity. The good work that I have begun in you includes the work of becoming who you were always meant to be. For some of you, this means becoming braver, more willing to take risks, and to step into challenges. For some of you, this means becoming more peaceful, more willing to slow down and to rest and to trust. For some of you, this means becoming more assertive, more willing to speak your truth and to claim your power. For some of you, this means becoming more compassionate, more willing to extend grace and understanding to yourself and others. But whatever the specific work is that needs to be done, it will only be completed when you surrender your idea of who you should be and allow yourself to become who you actually are. I remember a story of a shepherd who had 100 sheep and lost one. He left the 99 and went out searching for the lost one, and when he found it, he carried it home on his shoulders and called all his friends together to celebrate. This is how the divine regards you, not as one of a herd, not as interchangeable or replaceable, but as individually precious and worthy of personal attention. The work I am doing within you is intimate and personal. I am not treating you as a mass of humanity that must be processed and herded along a predetermined path. I am treating you as a unique individual with your own specific gifts, your own specific wounds, your own specific journey, and I am personally invested in your becoming, in your healing, in your transformation. But for this intimate work to be completed, you must surrender your belief that you are not worth this attention, that you are not important enough to merit the care of the divine, that your transformation is somehow less significant than someone else's. You must stop comparing yourself to others and measuring yourself against impossible standards. You must stop believing that you have to earn your worth or prove your value. You must surrender the story that you are fundamentally flawed or broken beyond repair. You must surrender the belief that everyone else has it figured out and you are the only one struggling. Because the truth is that everyone is struggling, everyone is learning, everyone is healing, everyone is a work in progress. And the ones who experience the most transformation are not those who pretend they have it all figured out, but those who surrender their pretense and their pride and their fear, and who allow themselves to be remade from the ground up. This morning, I am inviting you into a covenant with yourself and with me. I am asking you to commit to the practice of surrender, to make it a daily practice, even an hourly practice. When you wake up, before you check your messages or answer emails or jump into the demands of your day, I ask you to pause and to say, I surrender. I release my grip on needing to control everything. I open myself to guidance. I trust that there is a power greater than myself that is working for my highest good. And then, throughout the day, whenever you notice yourself gripping, whenever you feel anxiety or tension, or the sense that things are not going according to plan, I ask you to pause and to breathe, and to remind yourself that you do not have to do this alone, that you do not have to figure it all out by yourself, that there is a larger intelligence supporting you and guiding you every step of the way. And at the end of the day, I ask you to reflect on where you surrendered and where you resisted, with no judgment, simply with observation and curiosity and gentle self-compassion. The good work is ongoing. It will never be finished in the sense that you will never reach a point where there is nothing left to learn or grow or transform. But it will be complete in the sense that you will fully become yourself, fully express your purpose, fully live the life you were designed to live. And this completion can only happen through surrender, through giving up the struggle, through releasing the need to do it all alone, through opening yourself to grace and guidance and love. This is the work I invite you into. This is the transformation that awaits you on the other side of your resistance. And I promise you, with every fiber of my being, with the power of all the galaxies and all the dimensions and all the realms of existence, that when you take this step, when you surrender, when you say yes to the good work that I am doing within you, your life will never be the same. You will be healed, you will be transformed, you will be made whole, and most importantly, you will finally come home to yourself, to the truth of who you are, to the love that has been waiting for you all along. Amen.